Hamas says 13 armed groups in Gaza, including Islamic Jihad, have vowed to join forces to step up attacks on Israel. It follows the first direct talks between Palestinians and Israelis in 2 years in Washington. The United States Middle East envoy George Mitchell tried to counter low expectations of those talks by drawing parallels with Northern Ireland. He said when he was involved in those talks, we had about 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. But the Palestinian journalist Ali Abunima says that parallel is unfair. He's the founder of Electronic Intifada website. And he said because in the Middle East, because in Northern Ireland George Mitchell had included Sinn Féin IRA, it was exactly the same reason they should be including Hamas now. I spoke to him earlier.
George Mitchell and the United States more broadly took a very different approach in Northern Ireland, and I think that's really what was behind the success there, difficult as it was. For one, they recognized that you cannot simply exclude the parties and movements that you find inconvenient to include. So I think a significant example was that George Mitchell himself, when he was still a US Senator, urged President Clinton to issue a United States visa to Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams. And the reasoning, as George Mitchell later explained it in his memoir, was that by recognizing Adams, by starting a dialogue with Sinn Féin, you would encourage them to encourage the IRA to adopt a ceasefire. And that is, in fact, eventually what happened and allowed the peace process then to move forward.
And your argument is that the way that they're treating Hamas, there is no opening up to them at all?
Absolutely none. And I think the tragedy is that Hamas itself really did see the Sinn Féin model as, what it tried to emulate. So they took part in the elections in 2006 and won them. At the time, they were actually observing a unilateral ceasefire. Since 2006, they've been very clear about their willingness to engage in a long-term ceasefire with Israel, to recognize the 1966 boundaries, the 1967 borders, and to enter into a political process. But the door has been absolutely slammed on them. And what we've seen in recent days with the resumption of attacks on settlers in the West Bank is possibly those who say, well, the political strategy was doomed, winning the argument.
Okay, well, let's look at one other comparison with the situation in Northern Ireland. There were private talks with Sinn Féin IRA before they were made public. There's a presumption, we know some talks have gone on with Hamas. Do we presume that they are not getting anywhere?
Well, obviously, it's hard to know what's going on behind closed doors. We do know that there were secret talks with Sinn Féin and the IRA going back many years. And in fact, Israel, here's the irony, is that Israel already negotiates with Hamas. They negotiated with Hamas on several ceasefires through Egyptian and other mediation. And they've recently been negotiating with Hamas through German mediation on a prisoner exchange. And that's the irony, is that in the end, you end up talking to the people you say you'll never talk to. And I think that that process should be short-circuited. We should learn the lessons from Northern Ireland, because that's the way to get to peace faster with fewer people losing their lives.
One other thought. What it required, or what it appeared to require in Northern Ireland, was the US, George Mitchell, to come in and act the role as a sort of honest broker. Do you think the US cannot act that role between Israel and the Palestinians?
A very important point is the role that both of these conflicts have played in American domestic politics. And in the case of Northern Ireland, the Irish-American lobby played a tremendously important role in shifting the balance more towards the Irish side, the nationalist side. Whereas with Palestine, what we see is the Israel lobby, which is tremendously powerful in Washington, shifts the scales more towards the Israeli side. And the difference there is that in Northern Ireland, the Irish side was the weaker side. So having US pressure at key points coming in on the weaker side and balancing out the British role helped to bring an agreement with broad support. Whereas in Palestine, the unconditional support for the stronger side, Israel, really guarantees that we cannot make any progress toward a fair deal that could get that sort of support.
Ali Abunima, thank you very much.